Welcome back, folks. It's time now for today's Talkback segment. Before being convicted of first-degree murder, we saw defendant Chad ABSHER take the stand in his own defense. Now, ABSHER was accused of killing his girlfriend and shooting her sister in the face. All right, that was Brian Laundrie. That was not Chad ABSHER, but he, trust me, took the stand today. Now, we know the jury didn't believe him, but we wanted to know, what did you think of his time on the stand? All right, still with me, criminal defense attorneys David Bruno and Marie Pereira. All right, guys, our first comment comes from Ed. Ed says, he did terrible. His story makes absolutely no sense and is implausible. He just opened himself up, and the state ripped his story up in pieces during cross-examination. A guilty verdict is a safe bet. And Ed was right. He wrote that early in the day. Obviously, a guilty verdict did come in. David Bruno, you talked about it or touched on it a little earlier. The cross-examination of this guy was clinical. I mean, they had a lot to work with, but it was clinical.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the beauty of the cross-examination today was they had the physical evidence to go at him and just show that what he was saying was just not plausible. It just couldn't make sense with the trajectory. And believe it or not, and I was surprised, I saw the interview of the prosecutor after the verdict, and she said that she expected it. So she was definitely prepared for that. I'm surprised that she expected it. Oftentimes prosecutors will be prepared, but this particular prosecutor thought it was coming, and boy, was she ready for it. She was spectacular on the cross-examination, and she had the evidence with her. So preparation was key, having the evidence with you, common sense with you, and he was not very warming either. He did not make for a good witness, the way he communicated and the way he looked at the jury.
Yeah, no question about it. And she even asked him questions about things that were said on the 911 call, I bet hoping that he would say he didn't remember so she could play it again. So she got to play those 911 calls again for the jury while he was on the stand. It was just a hot mess. All right, our next comment comes from Christine. Christine says, sound like they planned to kill him. They came into the bedroom and beat his face in while he was sleeping. Glad he's testifying. So that's Christine. Christine seems to have bought his story. Had there been a Christine on this jury, things might have went a little different. But again, none of it made sense. She made clear that if they were beating you up on the bed and you were bleeding, where's the blood on the bed? The blood was in the closet, where some of the other witnesses says that the beating happened in terms of the ex-boyfriend of Lisa. Just so many ways that his story just didn't add up.
I'm not sure where Christine gets her account from, but I disagree with you, Christine, because if they believed it, the moment he took the stand and started the hama and the ridiculous story he concocted, it killed any chance of them believing that he might have been the victim. Perhaps he should have just not taken the stand, and maybe a couple of Christines could have found some reasonable doubt, but he took the stand. So any chance he had in proving that concocted story blew away when he opened his mouth.
Yeah, and David, you know, that was interesting because I thought the same thing. I thought there might have been some chance or even a chance for, let's say, a second-degree murder if he hadn't taken the stand. I thought once he took the stand, I thought he was the last nail in his own coffin.
Sure. I mean, the element that was required was premeditation. That's for that top count. And certainly there would have been arguments to be made about the scuffle, about the prior interactions and things like that. But like I said earlier, once a defendant takes the stand, it's all eyes on the defendant. I mean, defense attorneys make arguments in front of juries about witnesses not being credible or lacking personal knowledge or having biases, etc. And there are all kinds of attacks on the credibility of witnesses. But when the defendant takes the stand, all eyes on that defendant, and the defendant's credibility is at issue as well. And when you do what he did, doesn't match the evidence, that's where we get these quick verdicts, and we got one today.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, our next comment, guys, comes from Approach the Bench. That's their online name. His story makes no sense. Saying the victim shot herself in the back of the head is ridiculous. And that was the one that once he said that, it was like, okay, you're just making this up as you go. But what was interesting, Marie, before he took the stand, it took a while for him to decide to take the stand. I noticed that maybe there was some tension or perhaps not a great relationship between he and his attorneys. Talk about that, the fact that if there's not a good relationship there, if you're not working together well, that just makes things 10 times harder.
You know, I thought the same thing. Like, if I was his attorney, I'd be cringing. And I promise you, his attorney probably advised him against approaching the bench, because they knew the moment he opened his mouth, it was going to put a nail in his coffin. But again, it's up to the client. You can't force them not to testify. But I guess it's the situation where everything was so stacked against him. It was sort of like a what do you have to lose defense. Approach the bench. Why not? What do you have to lose?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, David, the way you can only really describe their entire defense was a Hail Mary. I mean, they called up a couple of people to kind of undermine the credibility of Lisa, but when he took the stand, he just kind of told a story that didn't make any sense. I'm not even sure how much the defense attorney would have even known about that story. But at the end of the day, if that's what they want to do as a defense attorney, that's what you got to let him do. All right, Marie Pedetta, David Bruno, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Truly appreciate it, you guys. Always a real pleasure to have you on the show. Folks, you're going to be sticking around. Coming up.